Hello and welcome to the Stateside Soccer Show. My name is Jordan Wiegand, and with me today is a guy who is going to an opening MLS game this weekend, Logan Stone.
I'm so excited. I cannot wait to see the Charleston Battery play.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, that's the wrong. Never mind. No.
That's the wrong one.
Orlando City, baby. Debut.
Against the team we're going to be playing, that we're going to be talking about today as well, the Red Bulls. So this is our season preview. This is our 167th episode. That's quite a number. That is, it's getting up there. We'll finish the season past 200. Amazingly,
that's a lot of time you and I spending together.
Too much.
And not to mention that some of those episodes aren't even counted in our episode count because Ted Lasso is not counted.
Yeah, the one yesterday.
Ones. Yeah, the ones yesterday.
Yeah, let's plug that. I guess
right,
let's plug that real quick. So yesterday we recorded a YouTube exclusive. I mean, a video exclusive. You can find it on Facebook and our Twitter as well. But it was a kit ratings of the 2023 new MLS jerseys. People are talking up these jerseys a lot. We're not going to spoil what we thought of them here. Go ahead and watch the video on YouTube or whatever. And we rated them on a scale of, we had a 4-tier scale here. And it was buy it now, wait for Ross, not a person, but the store. And then we had do not like it, like don't buy. And then we had burn it, which I think only 2 maybe got burn it. We'll see. But yeah, so that's what we'll be. You can catch all that action over there. Okay, so today we are previewing the Red Bulls, NYCFC, DC United, the Revolution, and the Philadelphia Union. And Logan, tell us who we have joining us today for the Philadelphia Union preview.
Yeah, so our friend Todd is coming over from the FreeKickPod. So I'm excited to talk to Todd because we haven't gotten to talk to him for a little bit. So I'm excited to talk all things Union. I'm glad I get somebody else in to talk about Union other than Jordan. So that'll be a lot of excitement just because I think Jordan is very realistic when it comes to the Union, a little bit more to the detriment of the Philadelphia Union. I think there's times where Jordan's a little bit, I don't know, Todd might be the same, but I think Jordan's a little bit more, I don't know. I wouldn't say pessimistic. I have
to be because like, I'm not used to good things.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
I like to set my expectations a little bit with, I'm not actually a big fan of the Union being like favorites. Like I see everybody picking them right now and I'm like, stop it. Just stop that. Right. It's like the same thing when I watch like pregame of like an NFL game and like everybody is picking the Ravens to win. And I'm like, no, don't do that. We're going to lose now. Like, why are you doing that to me? I don't know. I like the role of the underdog, I think, more than the role of the like expected giant, which is what the Union are becoming in the East, as we've talked about, a weak East. We'll get Todd's opinions on the East as well, if he sees them as being as weak as what we have. But, you were just saying you haven't spoken to him for a long time. I'm not going to brag, but I get to speak with Todd pretty frequently. We just talked at MLS Cup watch party, and also we DM back and forth. So humble brag for a guy that got to have Alexi Lawless on his podcast and got to have Jim Curtin on his podcast. So if you haven't listened to the Free Kick Pod, you're going to want to check that out for sure. Lots of good stuff when he went to the coaches convention. So lots of good episodes there. But yeah, so that's who we're going to be previewing today. Lots of good stuff there. So we have a few minutes before Todd joins us, Logan. So let's knock out one of these teams. What team do you want to start with here before we jump with Todd? You're muted, Logan.
No, let's go with, I was like, it was tucked in behind my other tab and I couldn't get to it quick enough. Let's start with, let's go DC United just because I feel like the other ones are a little bit more.
Yes, DC United head coach Wayne Rooney. They had a huge season last year. They won a trophy, Logan. They got the wooden spoon, 27 points, 7 wins last year. And not to dunk on them, but the Union scored like 13, 14 goals on them last year in 2 games. We had like a 7-0 and a 6-0. Oh, yeah, you have it in the notes. Thank you. A 7-0 and a 6-0 win that the Union had over them. But yeah, 7 wins for them. Losada was fired after just 6 games into the season. And then we had an interim coach, Chad Ashton, for a bit. And then they were like, never mind, get Wayne Rooney midsummer. And they also started to sell. They sold Julian Gressel to Vancouver. Edison Flores went to Liga Meki's Atlas. And then they brought in Christian Benteke, who was a big signing, random signing. And their defense was atrocious. Taxi Fountas came into the team and had 12 goals. Really the only highlight of the season. But they also lost a lot in the offseason now. They lose Brad Smith, David Ochoa, who wasn't a big loss, really. Rafael Romo, Hamid, Bill Hamid's gone. Ola Kamara is gone. Michael Estrada is gone. But they do bring in, I think, some pretty good players. They bring in Derek Williams, center back. They bring in Klitsch from Leeds, who is coming in. Ruan coming in as right back. Tyler Miller from Minnesota United. Pedro Santos coming from the Crew. Revel Morrison is coming over from Derby again. Alex Bono coming from Toronto. And Moanad Jaiz, left back from Hammurabi. I probably butchered that, and I apologize if he is listening to this episode. So, Logan, your thoughts on the differences between the departures and additions. I think they brought in some pretty good players. They still lost some pretty good players, but that's my vibe.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, we talked about this a little bit as far as like a wooden spoon champion. I guess I love that they always talk about like, did you really deserve or win the wooden spoon, or did you just fall into it? So I guess you were lucky enough to fall into it, DC United, and I think.
I think they deserved it.
I mean, Hernan Losada did not like. He thought they shouldn't give his players spoons because they're all overweight and he can't eat. But
yeah,
I think that was
harsh.
That was the thing. But I really like what they've done in the offseason, Jordan. They brought in a lot of MLS experienced players. And I think we've talked about this multiple times. You and I are a big proponent of MLS specific players coming into another team just because MLS is a different kind of league. I think the physicality, the pace of play and everything else is different from that of the European countries, even the African or Asian countries as well. So, I look at this roster. I love the Wuhan just because the Orlando City connection. But I do think that he's a pretty decent right back that you bring in. Mohamed Jaiz from Hammarby, I think, is a really good move. They kind of have to tighten up that defense. Derek Williams he was never really anything everywhere he's been. I know he was with the Galaxy last, and he's just never kind of fallen into form with any of the teams that he's been with. So, I don't think they've gotten exponentially better, but I think, a step in progress is better than nothing. But, I like the Pedro Santos move. I think Tyler Miller's a decent starter in this league, as far as a goalkeeper is concerned. But again, I think the biggest signing was Wayne Rooney last year. I think ultimately you saw what he did with Derby over in England. I think that he can kind of do the same thing and kind of make them a competitive team. And I think with Taxi up front and some of those guys coming in on the wing, I think this team is a formidable opponent in the East, which is pretty weak, and there's huge question marks all around the East. So I think DC did what they needed to do to get off the bottom.
Yeah, that's probably their biggest plus, right? Is that there is so much up in the air with the East that DC, if they put it all together, if the Rooney magic continues, like when he first got hired, he, had some huge wins and then it kind of fell back off a bit for him. But he's into the season and they're not like tired of it, then that'll be good. Taxi Fountas has to be kind of back at what he was last year, probably even better. I think he'll probably score more than 12 goals in a full season for them. But it's all about, these players, the ones that are not familiar with MLS, them coming over and getting used to it. But I like that they added a lot of MLS pieces. I think that's kind of a huge thing that you have to do. I think Benteke can score in this league. I think their biggest issue is going to be the defense and, making that better, because they were like, I don't have the numbers in front of me here, but they were awful in the defense. How many goals did they give up, Logan? Do you have that? 71.
Yeah, it was 71 goals. Yeah.
71 goals. That's got to be like a record. But yeah, so looking ahead to 2023, I think that they brought in a lot of quality pieces, but I don't know how high that puts them up the table, and we'll talk about that on the next episode that we're doing midweek. I already locked in my predictions, so those are locked in. And I don't know, a successful season for this club, if we transition there quickly, is what is your vibe for DC? I would say probably not wooden spoon, and if there's 9 playoff spots, just be competitive throughout the season for the 9th one. But I ultimately don't think they'll probably get there.
Yeah, I was going to say press for that 9 spot, but I doubt they get there. Anything 10 and above would be a really successful year, I think, for DC, just based off of what everything they're dealing with. I don't suspect Wayne Rooney's going to be there much longer than a couple of years, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I could see him, even if he had success this year, I could totally see if the job comes up, Wayne Rooney's gone. And I think that's the big thing with DC United, which is kind of sucky because it's, there's no stability, there's no identity right now with this team, and I think. This is of course a piecing together of MLS veterans plus the Matthijs Clich, and I think a lot of veteran players, guys that they rely on, need to be healthy. So I don't know. I think a successful year is pushing towards that 9th spot if that's what we're going to get to at playoffs.
All right, yeah, I agree with that. So what we're going to do now is transition here to the Philadelphia Union. So from the bottom of the East to the top of the East here, the Philadelphia Union, and we're going to welcome in Todd Lewis from the Free Kick. How are you today, Todd?
I'm great. How are you, Jordan and Logan? It's great to be back on the podcast. Long time no see, Jordan. Listening to you there, Logan, saying how you haven't spoken to me in a while, and now here we are, Logan. So it's great to be back on the podcast. And this time, I know last time you guys had me on, had some trouble connecting to how you guys record. No trouble this time, and so we're gonna have a fantastic episode. I know it.
Yeah, you said you worked that out on a bigger podcast. You made sure it worked on that one, right? A
slightly bigger podcast. Slightly.
I like the Charmander behind you, by the way, if you're watching the video podcast here.
Good eye.
Yeah, but Todd, I'm just glad you're here. And last time I saw you in person, even though we're like probably 5 minutes away from each other in real life, but in person we were at the MLS Cup viewing party, going through a swell of emotions as the game went back and forth, and we were talking a lot pregame about the vibe. I guaranteed a win, so I'm sorry for that, but just I guess reflecting on last year, because I was on your show before MLS Cup final as well, right? You did like a call-in show.
Yep.
And I think one of the ones that said it was still a successful season even if we didn't win MLS Cup. So I wanted to get your vibe on how successful last year was without winning it, and falling a point short of the Supporters Shield.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, successful season. And I even, you talked about a little bit how I was at the United Soccer Coaches Convention in Philadelphia in January. And I was asking some of my guests, well, did they consider 2022 a successful season? And everybody said, yeah. And why shouldn't it have been? I mean, we've seen every single year the Union take a step closer to getting to MLS Cup. They finally get there in 2022. They don't win it. Do they get there and take the next step, get back to MLS Cup, and now ultimately win it in 2023? I don't know. I mean, every single year they're taking a step closer and closer. So maybe it does happen, and I'm sure we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, 2022 was fantastic. Seeing this, the club scored 72 goals, I believe it was. I feel like the season was literally a few weeks ago, and it's like I already just erased all that out of my mind, getting ready for the 2023 season. But I mean, just Jordan, all the records the Union broke. Seeing Opta tweet out, "Oh, the Philadelphia Union broke this record. Oh, the Philadelphia Union broke this record." I mean, it didn't matter who the Union were playing. And yeah, it helps that they beat DC United by 13 goals on aggregate in 2022. So that's going to help pad your numbers a little bit. But it seems like every single game, the Union were breaking some kind of record. And the only way 2022 would have got better is if the Philadelphia Union would have won MLS Cup. And they don't get there. But look, let's talk about the final real quick, right? The Union go down in that game 1-0. And you were at the stadium, like you mentioned, with myself. And the vibe in that place, like nobody was down. Like, yeah, when we gave up that goal, I think it took the sting out of the air a little bit. But then people were like still excited because the Union were creating chances. The Union, even though they didn't get a goal there in the first half, they were still in that game, very much so. And then they come out in the second half, score a goal right away with Daniel Gazdag. Jose Martinez gets a lucky assist, takes that long range shot. That shot was completely off target, and luckily the ball falls right to Daniel Gazdag, and a player that got snubbed for the MVP voting last year does what he does best, putting the ball in the back of the net. And then the Union go down again with like 10 minutes left in the game, and they find a way again to tie the game up. And then we get into extra time. They take the lead, and that place, Subaru Park, erupted. I mean,
Yeah.
People were running around on the field, hugging. You saw people crying. I mean, so many emotions there for the 3 minutes that the Union were ahead. And then 1 minute to go, a player that shall not be named, that recently retired, that's turning into a pro golfer. We've seen this way too many times in his career. He kills all your hope, and the rest is history. But a fantastic season for the Philadelphia Union. Seeing Julian Kranza, who, let's face it, I think when you had me on the show, we talked about Julian last year. What kind of player are we going to get? The biggest thing about Julian was, okay, he's a defensive striker. He's going to work his butt off defensively, but he didn't add the goals in Miami. That's why Miami moved on from him. He scored 14 goals last season for the Union. We saw this preseason, Julian again continuing to score goals. And so to see that front three, Daniel Gazdag, Mikael Uhre, and Julian Kranza have a full preseason together and just continue to work on that chemistry, I think that's only going to help the Union. And seeing the team break that defensive goals against record with 26 goals against, I mean, that's unreal, right? And it could have been a lot lower too if they didn't lose 4-0 to Charlotte towards the end of the season. But what a season it was for the Union. And again, I'll get some fans that will say to me, well, yeah, they should have went for it in the U.S. Open Cup. They could have beat Orlando if they wouldn't have played the B squad. But look, they wanted to get a point in L.A. when they played that A squad. So would you rather have got destroyed in LA playing your B squad or going for it in the US Open Cup? A lot of people would probably say, yeah, we want to go for the US Open Cup. It doesn't happen. Orlando win the US Open Cup. Clear favorites, I think, throughout that tournament. And they're going to be favorites again coming up in 2023, which shall make Logan pretty happy. And especially with all the pieces they brought in very, very high on Orlando this season. But yeah, what a fantastic season for the Union. Would have been better if they would have won a trophy, but still, you can't be disappointed if you're a Union fan.
You know, I got a lot of crap on YouTube, by the way.
I knew this was coming.
Because I posted this video of my time at the MLS Cup watch party. And I, of course, only recorded the reactions to our goals, to the Union's goals. And I had so many LA fans ripping me saying, why did I leave out the best parts? One, what am I going to film? Like, by the time that I would take out my camera and film the reaction of an LA goal where there's no dupe, it would be silence. Yeah. And then they almost immediately went back into chanting. So it would have not been good anyway. But also, when I'm watching my team get scored on, my first instinct isn't, all right, let's video this. The way that I was trying to grab the atmosphere of Subaru Park, but I had a lot of them ask, how was it there when LA scored? That first goal, I think, almost took more sting out of the air than any of the other goals, because it looked we didn't really look great at times there, and then like LA scored kind of early. It was like 30 minutes in, right? It was pretty early in the game, and then we're like, great, now we have a mountain to climb. We have to come back in this game, but they almost immediately go back into chanting. Even the Gareth Bale goal, I think, stung more for me, obviously, but I think the place didn't give up. Like, we had already seen us come back a few times in that game where they were immediately chanting again and having a good time. So I wish I kind of had gotten it on camera for that reaction. But yeah, and that video took off for some reason. It's got like 1,000 or 2,000 views, and a lot of LA fans have jumped into those comments. So
thanks, LA fans.
I think it's 100% LA fans. Like,
I don't think any Union fans were like, "This was great." Like,
No.
It was all LA people. I guess that's the curiosity, right? As an LA fan, where you're like, "Oh, I want to see how the other place handled it." Right? I want to see them suffer, but I didn't give them the satisfaction of that. But you mentioned it, 72 goals. That's one more than DC United gave up all year. So that was a huge season. They gave up only 26 and did not lose at home. So that's where it comes down to. If we could have hosted that game, we might have won that, right? Like, that's what we would think, because we did not lose at all there. I mean, we didn't lose the final either. It went to penalties, so technically it's a draw.
But... a lot. Again, back-to-back draws in LA because we drew earlier in the season.
Yeah, but the penalties is what really sucked it out of sucked the air out, I think, is because they were so badly taken. And we didn't make one for I think we made the second one, right? But then
we didn't make a single penalty.
We didn't make a single one. That's right. See, I blocked that out.
Unfortunately, I tried to, but
all right. So departures that we had here: Paxton Aronson, Matt Freese, and Corey Burke. I would assume you think maybe Corey Burke's the biggest loss out of those three, but Paxton didn't get a lot of time because he was kind of blocked by an MVP candidate in Gazdag. And it was probably time for him to move on anyway. I felt like some of our young guys haven't had the opportunities a lot last year because we were pushing on a Supporter Shield run and an MLS Cup run. But out of those three, who is the biggest loss on this squad going into 2023?
Man, it's not even a player you mentioned. It's 100% Cole Turner, Harford County's own. I mean, that's the biggest loss right there.
In our hearts,
else?
Yes.
Who else am I going to get excited for that's like 15 minutes away from us? I mean, come on. Now what? I got to cheer for Loudoun United? No way.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, yeah, Corey Burke. I mean, you look, I did a podcast on this yesterday, I don't know, depending on when this is coming out. So I talked about how Corey Burke played the 13th most minutes on the club, and that's a significant amount of minutes that the club now needs to replace. And then you add in that Corey Burke had 7 goals on the season, where you talked about Paxton Aronson, where Paxton only played about 430 minutes on the season, so he didn't play a ton. I mean, we saw Paxton Aronson get subbed on quite a bit. 23 games he appeared in last season, only scored 1 goal against Cincinnati, which Cincinnati fans are probably happy that Paxton's gone since he's a Cincinnati killer. It seems like anytime Paxton played against Cincinnati, he scored. But yeah, I mean, we're really not losing a lot in Paxton Aronson. And now the question becomes, and I wrote about this too on my website, where are the goals going to come from? You know that you're going to get goals from Julian Kranza, from Mikael Uhre, and Daniel Gazdag. But after them, who's going to bring in the goals? We saw Alejandro Bedoya have a career year last season by scoring 6 goals. And then you had Corey Burke, 7 goals. And then you trickle in a goal here from Jack Elliott, a goal here from X player. So where are the goals going to come from? That's my question. And yeah, they bring in Joaquin Torres, Andres Pereira, who is a Union killer. So I'm glad that the Union don't have to face him anymore. But Joaquin Torres isn't really a proven goal scorer. I think he scored 7 goals in 2 seasons with Montreal, and where Corey Burke scored 7 goals in 1 season with the Union. So it's going to be interesting for the Union how they replace Corey Burke. Chris Donovan, who I guess is their backup striker, the third striker to Mikel and Julian. What's he going to do? I mean, he spent some of the season with Union 2, impressed so much with them, gets a first-team contract, and didn't play a whole lot with Union. We saw him in the final against LAFC.
That was puzzling. That was a puzzling move.
They had to bring him on for Corey Burke, getting injured by Crepeau. When he takes him out on that challenge, he gets the red card, and I think Union fans should have known once LAFC get that red card that they were doomed, because anytime the Union play against a team that's at 10 men, the Union just completely suck. And so maybe it would have been best.
Not just that though, but McCarthy coming in, and I was telling everyone that was sitting with me that we needed to win it in normal time, because I remember McCarthy being really good at penalties.
Yeah.
And I was like, we cannot face this guy in penalties. And I was unfortunately right.
Yeah. We don't have to talk about that game anymore.
But
yeah, I mean, the biggest question is, how do you replace Corey Burke? And they have Jose Riasco, who they signed last year to $4 million out of Venezuela. He spent the whole season with Union 2. You don't spend $1 million on a guy just to keep him with your second team. Obviously, this guy's going to make his first team debut eventually, you would think, with Union, because when we think about it too, Ernst Tenner last season signed Julian Kranza, Mikel Ua, Chris Donovan, and then he goes to Jay Sugarman and says, hey, I know we already brought in 3 strikers. Can we get a 4th one? And how many owners are going to say, okay, I'll let you bring in a 4th striker when you've already brought in 3? And on top of that, $1 million, which I know doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of teams, but for the Union, that's one of the highest paid transfer fees. And he spent the whole season with Union 2. And I get that, because he has to get used. It's his first time out of Venezuela. He has to get used to living in America, get used to playing in America. And you hope that he can eventually make his debut sometime this season with Union. Maybe he does add a couple goals, and that replaces what Corey Burke brought to the club. Maybe Chris Donovan's that guy. Asking Ali Bedoya to score 6 goals again, I think, is asking a lot. We never got a Kai Wagner or Jacob Glisson's goal last season, so, I mean, they're due, right? And Jose Martinez is yet to score a goal with the Union. I mean, he's got to be due too, right? So I think they do have pieces that can make up for the loss of Corey Burke, but without a doubt, Corey Burke is the biggest hole this team has.
So with the Union, I mean, we talked about this at length all the time whenever we were last year, especially just because of how good they were. And I was banging the Union drum all year. Like, this team is really good. Jordan and I talked about how they're oftentimes ignored, which is really shocking to me just because of how good and consistent they've been over the last couple of years. But like, Todd, if you're looking at this team, I mean, is there really, I have a hard time as, trying to be a neutral person on this. I have a team that I favor that is in the East, but I look at their roster, there aren't any weaknesses. Like, it seems like from top to bottom, and now they've added depth. Like, is there anywhere that this team, I mean, I just don't see where this team can really kind of improve on. I think they just need to stay away from regression. And like, I don't know if I'm wrong, but tell the fans what makes this team so special, and really just they don't have a weakness, it doesn't seem.
Yeah, I would argue, I mean, the only weakness, we just talked about it, not having Corey Burke, having that proven goal scorer come off the bench, that would be the only weakness for me. But as you mentioned, I mean, they brought in 3 players this season that have MLS experience, which is huge because, mind you, and I hate to keep bringing up LAFC, but what did LAFC do last season that eventually won them the MLS Cup? They brought in MLS players. And I think MLS experience is so underrated in this league. And somehow the Union were able to go out there, get 3 players that would be starters in other clubs, especially Joaquin Torres. With Mihailovic getting sold, he was for sure in line to be the number 10 for Montreal, but they get an offer that they felt was good. And you bring in a new coach in Hanan Lasada, where, okay, he's going to want to bring in his guys. So maybe it's a little bit easier to move on from a player like him. And Montreal's loss is the Philadelphia Union's game. And weaknesses, like I said, just not having that proven goal scorer, I think. But the Union should be fine. I really do think they should be fine. And you look at what makes this team special. I think the number one thing is having this team be together for the last 4 seasons. I mean, that is so undervalued, where they don't need to learn a new system. They don't need to learn chemistry with one another because they ran it back the last 4 to 5 seasons. And so that's money can't buy that. The chemistry between each other. And so having the core group of players here already playing under Jim Curtin, nothing's changed. The coaching staff has not changed. It's the same coaching staff from last season. Having Pat Noonan leave to go to Cincinnati, I think was a little bit of a blow for the Union because we saw what Pat did with Cincinnati. And I remember talking with Cincinnati fans telling them when I went out to the stadium, like, you guys are going to love Pat Noonan. He's a fantastic coach. And like, I'm not sold on him yet. And what makes Pat special? And I think Cincinnati fans got to see what makes Pat Noonan special last season, getting the team into the playoffs, winning a playoff game in the first time in the playoffs. And now you add, they're bringing back a core group of their players. So I think losing Pat Noonan, the Union had to adjust to a tactical mastermind that Pat Noonan is. But as the season got on, I think the coaching staff learned their roles and everything, and just that chemistry that the team continues to build with each other. I think that's just invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, Cincy also played a hell of a game against us.
They did.
in the playoff game. But yeah, so I wanted to ask you about Ernst Tanner here, because you mentioned signing like 3 MLS-based players, which was kind of like a first, where we kind of didn't go outside to grab like any of these players. What is it that made, like, last year was really the first year where you kind of started looking at players that are already in MLS. What do you think made the switch happen for Ernst Tanner? Was it like afraid of some of the misses? We've had misses. We've had players that haven't even like seen the field with us, and we had to sell them back, right? So what do you think it was last year that made him go get Carranza, and then this year look and say, I need to get some more of these MLS-based players already?
You just answered the question right there. Julian Carranza, 100%. Has to be the reason why Ernst Tanner felt comfortable going at MLS players. I mean, 14 goals last season when he couldn't find the back of the net in Miami. I mean, obviously, he was a talented player, talented enough that Miami felt comfortable signing him. But for whatever reason, actually, I think we all know the reasons how dysfunctional Miami was when they first joined the league. When you go through multiple coaching changes, front office changes, bringing in superstars, not really a team.
10
which
DPs.
Now we're seeing,
Yeah.
now we're seeing Miami actually become a team and not rely on a superstar. And that's the recipe for success, because that's how the Union operate. But I think really seeing Julian Carranza thrive in the Union system gave Ernst Tanner the confidence to go out and say, look, if we have the opportunity to sign more MLS players, maybe not as free agents, but if we can trade for them, we're comfortable doing that. The Union had a ton of GAM, and I think that's the one thing that fans, media members alike hate about this league, where how it just seems like it's so closed, where they're not transparent. So we don't know how much money the Union really have to spend in GAM in 2023, because they got GAM from selling Paxton Aronson to Frankfurt. And I think you can allocate $1.2 million here, GAM budget. We don't know if the Union put 1.2 million of that to the 2023 budget or not. They get GAM for Matt Freese. They get GAM for Ben Martino, who was a goalkeeper out of their academy, who never played for the first team because he played at Virginia Tech, I believe it is. And Nashville needed a backup goalkeeper, and they said, we think this guy's talented. We'll give you $50,000 in GAM. And so the Union found ways to add GAM, and you're not going to just let that sit there. And so I guess Ernst Tanner and the front office identified some players that they felt comfortable. If they can get them at a good deal, let's bring them into Philadelphia. Andres Pereira is a fantastic player. I'm super excited to see him thrive in this Philadelphia Union team. And I asked Jim Curtin about this a couple times because, as Logan knows, Orlando City play with 2 6s. They play with those 2 holding midfielders, and the Union don't do that. So can Andres play as one of the 2 shuttlers? I think he can. I think he's talented enough. I think he has the stamina, the passing ability, surely, to do it. Offensively, I think he's a little bit more advanced than Leon Flock. Maybe you don't want to have Leon Flock and Andres on the field at the same time being your 2 shuttlers because both players are defensive minded. I think there's going to be times where the Union play 3-5-2. Jim Curtin mentioned it, where you can play with those 2 6s. And so, again, Andres thrived in that system in Orlando, but Orlando had a lot of depth in that spot. And so they were comfortable moving on from him. And now let's see if he's going to be the Union's gain. Joaquin Torres, Jim Curtin said it so many times this season already in the press conferences that they haven't had a dribbler like Joaquin since El Senior retired from the team. And so you bring in a player that can draw attention of 2 to 3 players. We saw it happen multiple times with El Senior. Now that's going to leave Julian Kranza, Mikhail Uor, Daniel Gazlag in 1v1 situations against center backs, against defensive midfielders. And my money's on those 3 to get the best of center backs and defensive midfielders. And so if you can get them in situations where it's easy for them to score because Joaquin Torres is drawing the attention of 2 to 3 players, I think that's going to help this team tremendously. And you add in a player like Quinn Sullivan, you mentioned didn't really see a lot of minutes with the homegrown players. Well, now maybe there's going to be opportunities for Quinn Sullivan to break into this team where they only have 3 strikers. And I know Quinn's not a striker, but you throw him up top there and everything, and maybe he gets free and everything. He's a clever player. He knows how to make clever runs. And so if Joaquin Torres can draw that attention of 2 to 3 players, find an open Quinn Sullivan, yeah, we can see Quinn Sullivan add some goals this season. And then Damian Lowe, this is a player that I wasn't high on watching Miami last season. I mean, I will admit that he was Miami's best defender. I think that's clear, but that's not saying much when you look at Miami defensively. And
Right.
Miami very much so felt confident that, hey, look, we can move on from Damian. And they had a center back in mind. We saw them sign a center back from Shakhtar Donetsk in Ukraine. I'm not going to try to pronounce that name again. I already tried once on my show, probably got it horribly wrong. And I know you made the joke.
Join the club, yeah.
Yeah, where you're like, hopefully this player for DC United is not listening because I'm sure I got his name completely wrong. And I appreciate you, Jordan, at least giving it a stab, trying to say the names, because sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to try this name at all like I'm doing now. But Damian Lowe, I mean, he clicks all the boxes that the Union won in their center backs, where they're good in the air, where they block shots, where they're good at intercepting, where they're good at tackling. And I wrote an article about this maybe a month ago on Damian Lowe, just looking at his numbers, and it's like, no wonder the Union were interested in him because he clicks all those underlying numbers that the Union look for in their center backs. And so are we asking these 3 players to be starters? No, we're asking them to be depth pieces. And I think that's going to be zero pressure on them, where in Montreal, maybe it's a little bit of pressure for Joaquin to take the keys and replace Mihailovic, which is a tough ask. And now he's not asked to do that in Philadelphia. The Union clearly saw something in him where they felt comfortable bringing him in. So there should be no pressure on Joaquin Torres. Damian Lowe, again, no pressure on him. He's not expected to be the man like he was in Miami. And so I think all 3 players are going to be great additions by the Union. And with up to 55 games, these players are going to get plenty of opportunities this season for the Union.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. I'm always fascinated with this, just this whole club in general and how it's operated and how scouting must go and the underlying numbers in their stats department must be phenomenal, just because it seems like the Union know when it's time to move on, or at least ramp up to get ready to move on. Because I always feel like the Union have that backup plan, like you said, Andres Perea, I think is fantastic. I think it was never a situation that was good enough for him here in Orlando, because I think he doesn't play to their style. Like you said, they like the 2 holding 6s. They like to, really muddy things up in the midfield. And Perea was good with that, but he also was great at shuttling the ball back and forth. I mean, he's great from box to box. He really does like to join the attack, but they didn't really need that with Pereira out there. So it's like, okay, well, let's move on. And I think the union just do a really good job of, I mean, in my time that I've now covered the league, Montero was there. They decide to move on. With the Quakes, he's kind of just a shell of himself. You go with Shabelko, and Chicago has probably one of the worst teams in the league now, and he's not done anything there. So it feels like the union just know. And then they grab these guys like Julian Carranza, who was supposed to be great for Miami. Miami didn't know what to do with him, so they move him on, ship him out. And the union just looked like they collect these pieces, turn them into diamonds in the rough, and then they go and just sell them if they really want to, and they're going to get money. It just seems like this. So I guess the machine is well oiled, and there's really nothing else that I think the union do that it's the model club. I always felt that way as kind of an outsider, not a fan of the club itself.
Yeah, and the union have this really interesting model where they call it PUV, which stands for Philadelphia Union Value. And the Athletic had a really good write-up on this a few months ago, where PUV, what that is the union's analytic department is so advanced where they scout these players. And PUV, they look for players that are going to fit into the style of play for the union. They don't look at those players' characteristics. They look at, can they fit into this Philadelphia Union system? How are they going to be in the locker room? Every single player that Ernst Tenner has signed has been fantastic for the locker room. That's the number one thing he looks for is this player going to disrupt my locker room? If he is, we're not going to sign him. Ernst Tanner talked about that in the United Soccer Coaches Convention, where, there's been players in the past where they've had the chance to sign players, and he's like, well, this is like your fifth or sixth club that you're about to be on. Why is that? And it turns to be an attitude issue. We don't want that. We saw some attitude issues with Anthony Fontana, which I probably shouldn't have named him, but I named him in 2020, and the union don't re-sign him. He goes to Italy, and he's now out of Italy. It didn't work out for him. Jamil Montero, there was a dust up in the locker room between him and Kai Wagner and Ernst Tanner, and then the whole rumor saying, oh, Jamil Montero is getting shopped and everything. And then the offseason, the union don't really get any offers. So, okay, well, we're going to get him out of our locker room. We shipped him off to San Jose, and now he's at San Jose. And so you're right, Logan. I mean, when the union know it's time to move on from a player, they move on. And having PUV, identifying players that can thrive in the union system, that are going to be good in the locker room, that are family guys, I think more clubs should follow that model. Not, okay, look at this player for his talent. Look at how this player can fit into my team, which I'm sure teams do, but they don't do it as in-depth as the Philadelphia Union do.
That's what I tell Jordan this all the time. I would love Jim Curtin to take the U.S. helm, just because it's like it's the ability to change. And Jordan talks about this a ton. He goes, I hate when teams go out, and Jordan's a big proponent of it. I hate when teams go out and just get guys to get guys and don't have any idea what the system is. He goes, I hate that we're in this mindset where we have to change the system just based off of this idea, and we don't fit it to the player's best ability. So, like, for instance, Greg Berhalter playing the 4-3-3 and really just kind of not really getting it to fit with the players that he really needs, and he has. But I think Jordan speaks more to that than I do, but he has been. I think it's the union, the union blood that runs through him, just because it seems that way.
Yeah, well, the good thing is, right, that even if Jim Curtin was to move on, which he's hinted at, maybe he would even take a assistant U.S. coach's job for 2026. This is the last year of his contract, right?
Yep.
So I would think Ernst Tanner is going to find somebody that plays the same way or will be willing to play the same exact way, and he's going to fit them in exactly like he does the players. And I think we probably wouldn't have a huge drop off. Some of these teams, as soon as their manager is gone, the team suffers, right? There's only a few teams that are able to withhold their positions. But, speaking of how these players are depth pieces, we have a heavy season coming up here because we got Champions League again. We have Leagues Cup in the middle of the season. We have MLS. We have the Open Cup. What would you think would be the focus of this club and the reason they got the depth? Are they making a push for Champions League, or is it we want to compete on multiple fronts, or is it we need to beef up again to try to get that MLS Cup final hosted our home instead of having to travel? Like, what is the main goal that contributed to them going to get these pieces?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the goal is gonna be, Jim Curtin said, we're gonna go for every single competition that we're in, which, okay, that sounds nice and everything, but is it realistic? Maybe it is. Maybe it is, since they got the depth pieces. But I think number one goal right now at the start of the season is CCL. And
Mhm.
I talked about this a little bit on my show too. And sorry for plugging that for like my third
That's why
time.
you're
But
here, man. Don't worry about it.
but the Union have a chance to play 28 games in the first half of the season. That's more than half of a season of MLS just in the first half of the season. That is a ton of games with the US Open Cup, with Champions League, with the league. And so I do think that the Union are going to suffer a little bit early on in the league because they're going to prioritize Champions League. And when you look at the bracket, the Union by far have the easiest side of the Champions League bracket, where I feel so bad for you, Logan. Tigres,
Yes, I
I mean,
felt
they're on
so bad
fire
for
right
him
now
too.
in Liga MX. I was just talking with a buddy today. I'm like, Pachuca, Tigres. I mean, poor Orlando. Like,
I'm already
they
crying.
finally get in in the CONCACAF Champions League, and they get the toughest team you could possibly get. And it would be a miracle if Orlando City can find a way to knock them off. If they do, I'll be so happy. But yeah, I mean, I think clearly on the left side of the bracket, it's Pachuca and Tigres as the favorites. Where on the right side, I mean, you got to say the Union, LAFC, will potentially be in the final. Will probably be in the final because there's nobody else on the right side of the bracket, in my opinion, that's a real threat like Tigres would be or Pachuca would be. And so I do think the Union are going to prioritize Champions League. I think they will go for a run this season in the US Open Cup because looking at the schedule, I mean, those 28 games, the Union are going to be having a lot of 3 or 4 day rest days. There's going to be multiple Union games a week, which is great for Union fans where they don't have to wait a week to watch the club. 2-3 games a week for the Philadelphia Union fans. I mean, that sounds fantastic. For the players, maybe not so much. A lot of wear and tear on their bodies, and especially like we talked about earlier. I mean, it seems like the season just ended, and now here we are at the start of the 2023 MLS season, and it
Yeah.
gets very interesting too at the end of May, where the Union are supposed to be hosting Charlotte, but the same day, the leg one of the CCL finals that day, and so they're not going to change the CCL final. They're going to flex out the MLS game if the Union are still in it, and then you have 4 days after the first leg of the final of the Champions League. You have a game against Montreal at home, and then the next day you have the final, the second leg of the Champions League on June 4th. So I think there's going to be a lot of games getting flexed out. And then after that Champions League final, you have the US Open Cup quarterfinals on June 6th. So a ton of games just stacked up one after the other. A lot of high contestant matches that I think the Union will prioritize the US Open Cup and the Champions League, like I said, over the league. Where, yeah, in the second half of the season, the Union get a lot more rest days that they can start to focus more on the league because Champions League will be up. The final of the US Open Cup, I believe, is in September 27th. And so, yeah, I know we have Leagues Cup in July, June. I don't know. I don't
Take
care
a whole
about that
month off
competition.
for it.
Yeah, a whole month off. You play what? 2 group stage games, and then the top 2 teams advance or something. So hopefully the Union get knocked out right away, so the players can rest after
Have you
playing.
seen our group?
Hopefully,
Have you seen?
yeah, I
I don't
did.
think we're getting knocked out.
Yeah, I know, playing the 2 weaker Liga MX
Yeah.
teams, but maybe we can just play the second team, play Union too, and let the
Put that
team
out there.
recover from 28 games hopefully in the first half of the season.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, first half of the season, you got to prioritize Champions League and US Open Cup. Overall, I think, I mean, they've got to win one of those trophies, the Champions League or MLS Cup. If they win US Open Cup, great. But I wouldn't call that a successful season if they just come away with the US Open Cup. It's got to be one of these major trophies. And Champions League or MLS Cup. If they won both, great. I don't think they will, but it's got to be one of those big trophies.
All right, so looking at this team, Todd, if everything goes well, they get some kind of silverware. Is this Jim Curtin's last season with the Union, you think?
Ooh, now that good question. If they win silverware, if they don't win silverware, I think Jim Curtin would be back. But would he be tempted to leave? It's got to be the right job, right? And he's talked about it on multiple podcasts, saying, if I'm going to go to Europe, it has to be the right situation, the right club. He's talked about, okay, yeah, it sounds good that you're coaching in Europe, but a lot of these clubs set you up for failure.
Mm-hmm.
And do you really want to leave something that's so stable for failure? He's talked about how in a lot of these countries, the union setup's much better than teams in Denmark and Sweden. And seeing the union invest, yeah, fans might be annoyed that they're not investing a ton of money into big name players, but they're investing into the academy, they're getting a new training pitch. They're bringing the academy down to Chester. They're building, I think, 6 brand new fields. They're building a brand new stadium that the academy and Union 2, I think, can play on. So, they're really starting to make it into a super complex down there in Chester, and they got to get that money from someplace, and it comes from selling these players and everything. And I think that's great for the Union to invest the money that way. But if the Union won a trophy, would Jim Curtin leave? It's got to be the right job, I'll say. If the right job comes along, I think he'll highly consider it. But here's something, too, I think fans don't think about. Jim Curtin has kids, and his kids aren't done with school yet. And so that's so hard to tell your family, we're going to leave the only place that you know. We're going to leave your friends behind. You've got a good system in school and everything. We're going to uproot all that. We're going to go overseas, or we're going to go here. I think that's asking a lot for a family, and I think that does play on Jim Curtin's mind. And so if the U.S. came calling and said, hey, we're going to make you the manager, I think Jim would take it. Jim said you'd be foolish enough not to be a part of the 2026 coaching staff, whether it be an assistant or the manager. And so he said it on Marcus Beasley's podcast. I forget the name of it. Sorry for you guys listening. But he said that if he was asked to be an assistant, he would leave his union job right now to go be an assistant, because it's that important with us hosting the World Cup in 2026. So I'll say if the right job comes along, Logan, that he will lead, but it's got to be the right job.
Yeah, their podcast is called The Crack. Just looked it up. The Crack podcast. Yeah, too, I know everybody's trying to make a lot of the U.S. men's national team stuff with the assistant stuff, but really he could become an assistant for just the summer while play is suspended for MLS and come right back to the league. Like, the assistants don't have to be there as long as the coach does. We saw some assistants join the U.S. team, like Vlatko, who is the U.S. women's national team manager, was an assistant or something, part of the staff over in the men's World Cup for the U.S. in Qatar. So that's possible too, that he just signs an extension with the union, which is what I assume he will do.
Yeah, exactly.
I think for him to walk out, he would have to win MLS Cup and the Champions League in like a double to be like, you know what? I don't think I could ever top that. And then he would leave. But again, it would have to be the right situation for him, because this is like his hometown, right? He's comfortable here. You brought up the good point with the kids too, because that's hard to uproot your whole family like that. And when you talk about teams setting you up for failure, we saw that with Jesse Marsh.
Yep.
They
still don't have a plan in place.
Nope. They let him spend all that money in January, gave him 2 games with those players, and then fired them. And we're like 2 weeks later with no plan for hiring anyone, which is insane.
You think they'd bring him back? Say, yeah, we messed up.
No.
We shouldn't have fired you.
I don't think so. I think at this point, they'll just, I don't know what they're going to do. Ride it
They're
out
going down.
and go down. Yeah. And get Bielsa for a push-up next year, maybe. I mean, that's what the fans want. right now. I was on their subreddit, like seeing what they thought after they still lose without Marsh. But kind of just to wrap it up here, I guess you mentioned successful season, Open Cup would not count, right? Is your thought? For me, I think we need some sort of silverware again. And I'll pretty much take anything. I think Open Cup means a lot to me because I was at those 2 finals we hosted and watched us lose both of those games. And then in 2018, when we had where we faced Houston, I was watching on TV. So I think I don't know if I would say a successful season, but I would love to win the Open Cup. But it's obviously the lower tier trophy at this point. So is a successful season, Todd, only winning one of those big trophies? Or is there another path here of, okay, we got to the final again and lost? Or like, what is the bottom line of this is how we're going to rank success for this team in 2023?
Yep, you got to win Champions League or MLS Cup. Anything else is not going to cut it. I mean, you go out and you make all the signings that you make. Clearly, you're going for trophies this season. You're going for the big trophies, and there's no more saying, okay, well, we won a playoff game. We won 2 playoff games. We made it to MLS Cup final. We made it to Champions League final. No, you've got to win one of those this season. Hello, Logan's cat. You got to go ahead and just do it. No more making excuses saying, okay, well, at least we made this, making progress one step at a time. You got to go ahead and win Champions League or MLS Cup. The US Open Cup, I've talked to some fans about that too. And they said, they don't care about winning MLS Cup because we've already been in 3 finals. And so it's like, they just, I think fans are just so hurt from watching the team lose in 3 finals in the Open Cup. They just, they don't want to see it anymore. But somehow these fans wanted to see the Union play the A squad against Orlando City in the Open Cup. But you talk to some people and they're like, yeah, I don't care about making the US Open Cup roster anymore.
Right.
But it's like, you guys wanted them to play the A squad against Orlando City. But here you are saying, yeah, I don't care if we win US Open Cup. So which is it? Like, you can't have both. And so, yeah, it would be cool to win US Open Cup or to win the Supporters Shield, but I don't care about that. You got to win MLS Cup because you can't keep saying, well, at least we made it this far. Like I said, you've got to win one of those trophies.
I get your point because what we've seen the incremental increases each year, right? And at this point, there is no more of that. Like, we got to the final. The only way to have an increase is to win MLS Cup. Maybe I'm more forgiving on that, though. I like that you're putting the pressure on with that, honestly, and I'm sure that's what Curtin and the team, the club, probably agree with you. Like, hey, we're not going to be happy until we win that thing. But I would say the one that would get me like the least motivated would be the Supporter Shield because we already have one, and because it doesn't mean that much anymore with the unbalanced schedule. But yeah, I think at that point, if it was just a Supporter Shield for 2023, I'd be like, this wasn't successful. We already have that in our trophy cabinet. I'll take it, of course. I'll put it in the trophy cabinet. But at that point, it's like, damn, I can't believe we squandered another chance with this squad. Because you've talked about how we've gone like 4 years, right? 4 or 5 years with the same squad.
They're not going to be here much longer. I mean,
exactly.
Pieces are going to
we're losing
eventually
the
get
time.
sold.
Yeah, we're losing the squad. Bedoya is probably not going to last
last
much
year of his
longer.
contract. Yeah.
So that's what we have to get. I'm curious to hear Logan's thoughts on what a successful season for the Union is.
Make the play. No, I'm kidding. Just make the playoffs, guys.
Well, maybe that is going to be the ask. I mean, if MLS goes to nine teams per playoff, per conference, and if the Union do suffer a lot of losses in the first half of the season, maybe it is all right. Let's just get into the playoffs and hope for the best.
Yeah. No, I think honestly, MLS Cup is ultimately what comes to mind. But I will say, out of the years that I've covered the league, I think that the Union, depending on how many players are left after the season because of Club World Cup when it falls, I really do think that the Union, with his coaching style, with the way that they play, with the depth that they have, I think would have made a better run at some of these teams. I just think Seattle, while they're in preseason form, they just couldn't get. I think that roster is just kind of depleted at this point, where they're just older. And I don't know how good they'll be this year. Where I do feel like the Union are a formidable opponent for a lot of the European teams, which is why I would always be interested to see them play against some of these teams, because I do think the Union, the way that they coach, Austin and LAFC are the three teams that really could do some damage against some of the European teams. But again, I think a successful season looks like the Union taking home MLS Cup or winning the Champions League, just because I think they've got to kind of decide, and I think they have decided that Champions League is really important. So I think, like you said, Todd, they're the easier side of the bracket. I think it's a very manageable thing to do. I think the East, honestly, I mean, I'm looking at these clubs, and Jordan and I've talked about this, and we're kind of previewing some of these teams. Unless some of these, it's so weak. So I don't even know if you've really got to prioritize this season besides finishing 1 and 2. And I think that's easy, because I think they're heads above everybody else. They add a couple depth pieces. They've got 2 squads pretty much that they can play with some of the young kids. So I think that's massive.
My only problem with that too is that we saw how important the season was last year by us missing out hosting the final by 1 point. So
that's true.
So while I know Curtin said this in an interview, I forget where it was, right? That like he wished we knew the playoff format, because he might be able to rest some players on some of those. I don't think he used that term exactly, but kind of like he would prioritize CCL, and there's more forgiving room to make the playoffs with 9 teams. But I don't want to end up in a situation again where we're like facing LAFC, who also got first, and we did not like have enough points to host a final again. Like that would be killer. I mean, I have faith that we could probably eke one out, but it's like I don't want to be like the Bills or the Revs here either, where we keep getting to finals and losing. So there's that's the issue, is that the only trophy we have right now is from one that you don't get into a final. You get into just from the Supporter Shield, so it doesn't hit the same. Especially it was a COVID year, so I feel like some people will kind of, hand wave that one away. But Todd, I want to thank you for coming on here. Where can everyone find because you plug the website too, because you write stuff now too. Where can everyone find your work?
So you can check out the podcast by searching The Free Kick. Check out the website, thefreekick.net. Really trying to make it a goal this season to obviously still prioritize the podcast. But I do want to write more. Last year I did, towards the end of the season, a lot of match reviews. I want to focus on match recaps. Obviously, still I want to do match previews and just whatever else I can write. And so I plug this on my show. If people want to come and write, cover the Philadelphia Union, hit me up. You can hit me up on social media at It's a Todd's Life on Twitter, at It's a Todd's Life _ on Instagram. Just created that account. Or you can find the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at FreeKickPod. I mean, that's pretty much it. So I thank you guys for both having me on the podcast once again. And like I said, happy not having any audio troubles this time. And we were able to get the show on the road and not have you guys waiting. And you guys are doing fantastic work on the podcast, just, talking about this league. I think that's so hard when you're talking about every single team, where I'm just focusing on one team. And I even said this too in an article I posted and said it on the podcast, where my Western Conference knowledge is nowhere close as what it is of the Eastern Conference, because I pay attention to the teams that the Union play. And we all know that they play primarily Eastern Conference teams. And so I don't know a whole lot about the Western Conference. I know about the Western Conference, but not as confident as I do the Eastern Conference. So to see you guys just spend time and talk about the whole of MLS and have a good understanding of MLS, I think that's a kudos to you guys, and you guys are doing a fantastic job with your show. So I thank you guys for that.
Thank you. That's why we have Todd on here. He gives us the kudos.
Yeah. Our nicest guest. No, I'm kidding. Everybody else listening, don't listen. But yeah, we always enjoy having you on, Todd. You're a wealth of knowledge, and your coverage of the Union, I go to it. I don't listen to Jordan. So
that's a good idea. And that was Todd Lewis from The Free Kick. Thanks to Todd for coming on. So, Yeah, I mean, I thought I was going to have to ask him if he had notes with all those dates of games on there, because he was spouting those off on like even suspected quarterfinal dates for the US Open Cup, but it looked like it was all coming from the top of his head. So just like a wealth of knowledge there for the Union's opening 28 possible games that could happen at the start of the season. So thanks, Todd, for just being able to pull that information out from the top of your head. But yeah, so we're going to go ahead and look at the Red Bulls. Let's do this team next. Last year, 4th in the East. They scored 50. They gave up 41 goals. They were mostly consistent about beating teams they should beat. They didn't really give up a lot of cheap goals. And, Gerhard Struber did a much better job last year using the depth. The Red Bull playing method can usually wipe you out. We see that with a lot of teams overseas, even the Jesse Marsch teams, the Leeds, the Salzburgs, the Leipzigs. But the best stretch of this team came in the late summer as they went 4 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss from August 17th to September 10th. And they had huge, massive wins against Atlanta, Miami, and New England that pretty much became 6-pointers because they were in hunt for some of those positions as well. And this is a team that's consistently in the playoffs, in the top half of the playoffs. They are a team that I think many people look up to. Lewis Morgan scored 14 goals. It was a huge season for Lewis Morgan. Some people are giving him shouts for MVP. We'll talk about if we have him in that conversation in the midweek. But just a team that was kind of like in the whole season, and then randomly you're like, wow, they ended up 4th. That's pretty good. And if they were kind of like that last year, if they can bring another level, there's a possibility for them to finish above the top 4. But Logan, give me your thoughts on Red Bulls from last season.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've just got really good performances from some of the players that I don't think they really thought were going to have those breakout years, kind of like a Lewis Morgan. Frankie Amaya was fantastic last year. The guys that didn't really play well were Patrick Kalamala, who's now gone. They shipped him off, who he was a DP, and then Luquinhas, who they brought in to kind of anchor in that midfield. And he also was not to a DP level. Only 1 assist in the last 16 MLS games that they played. But I feel, Kalamala, falling out at the, I guess, right after May is when he fell in the starting 11. And this team just lacked having that really, really consistent goal scorer aside from Lewis Morgan, right? We always talk about the 4th and 5th place teams, Jordan, they always seem to have like that person lying around the 15 to 16 goal mark and nobody to kind of pair with them. So I think that that's ultimately what the Red Bull run into. And I think with, a couple additions here and there in this offseason, they could have pushed themselves up to be, and you and I joked about this, but they always seem to be a consistent number 4 or 5. I think that's just the way that this team is kind of built. And they played really well last year. They made the playoffs. They got to the U.S. Open Cup semifinals against Orlando, took the lead against Orlando. I thought that they were, if Red Bull win that game, then they go on to win U.S. Open. And I think, are contenders to kind of win that trophy again, because I think that their style of play really does kind of play well to the U.S. Open Cup. So, yeah, I mean, I think a good, solid year for the Red Bull. And I think going forward, if they can kind of find that DP, difference maker in that midfield or up in the front of their attack, I think that this team becomes, a 2 or 3 option easily and behind the Union. So I think that's kind of where we're headed into 2023.
They lose Aaron Long. He goes to LA. They lose Kamala. They lose Tom Edwards. Otherwise, not a lot of losses. Who do they add? A person that Todd said was the biggest loss of the Union. Corey Burke scored 7 goals, having the 13th most minutes for the Union. I don't think Burke will be the answer for Red Bulls, but he can certainly help them, I think, a bigger amount than what they've had before. They also add in Dante Van Zier. Had 70 goals and 26 assists in his 157 career appearances in the Belgian Pro League. So there you go. He also played for Belgium in a 2021 World Cup qualifying match against Wales. But just like two, arrivals, they lose 3, so they're pretty staying consistent. I think that Burke is probably a bigger help than Kamala, so this is probably an upgrade overall because they're also not adding just one center forward. You got Van Zier as well. So some question marks going on to 2023. Will this defense be as good without Aaron Long? To me, he looked like some of the weaker spots of the defense last year. He hasn't really been the same since his injury. So I actually don't think they're going to take a huge step backwards with Aaron Long gone. Is that your estimation as well?
Yeah, I think Aaron Long has passed his window. Like, he's looked awful in U.S. men's national team camps. Looks slow. Like, you know how guys usually come back from those and they don't really lose much of a step because, I mean, knee issues have or maybe it was Achilles with him, but it was, I think it was Achilles, but like, I just feel like he's a step slower than what he used to be. I think that defense really, you rely on getting pressed and pressing forward and getting into the attack space and relentless pressure. And I don't think Aaron Long can provide that anymore. But yeah, I think regression defensively is not going to happen. I think that they're a pretty solid defensive team and defensive unit. And so I think going forward, I mean, this Red Bull pressing system ultimately is something that can propel this team going forward in 2023.
Yes. So Frankie Amaya, right, made the switch from Cincy to Red Bull. Was that actually last year or was that the year before?
Year before, I believe.
Wow.
2021.
Time flying.
Yeah.
But can he stay healthy and can he kind of up his level some? I don't think he's really reached the heights that many have thought. Do you still think he can reach a height in MLS?
Yeah, I think he showed really good potential last year towards the end of the year, starting to really kind of come into his own. I think that with another season with Gerhard, and honestly, I mean, Frankie Amaya's ability is going to depend on who they put in front of the ball. I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. If Van Zier can be that, dangerous attacking player, or Corey Burke steps in and does score some goals, I think that ultimately Frankie's play increases. I think Frankie's good going forward. I think he's good creating chances. I think he's also good, pretty decent defender. So I think that ultimately, I think that Frankie could take the next step. And if he does take the next step, that's huge for this midfield that I think is one of the strong suits for Red Bulls.
Okay, so the last few seasons, they've kind of finished in the 4th and 5th spot here. The goal is probably going to get over that. So when we pivot to kind of like a successful season for the New York Red Bulls, I saw some people already putting out their predictions, by the way, and some of them have them as favorites to win a supporter shield or even just winning the East. I think a successful season would even just be jumping up to second. Like, let's get up to second. Let's push that Union club. Let's be neck and neck with them. If we can get that first spot, great. If not, we're second. Let's go into the playoffs. Let's get some more momentum. And maybe, I'm not saying this is what they need for a successful season, but what they could just be thinking, let's keep climbing, get second, and maybe we can get into an MLS Cup final and maybe bring home some silverware that they haven't done yet. They've won a supporter shield that added to it, but for a while, Logan, this was a club that people clowned on for never winning a trophy as an original MLS club. They have some supporter shields, that's fine. But looking at the big one, the one that their rival beat them to 2 years ago now, NYCFC beating Portland for a MLS Cup win for a club that's pretty brand new compared to the Red Bulls. That's what I think their aspiration should be. But I think just to look back at a success, I'd say top 2 in the East for this team should be a reasonable benchmark for them to try to reach, because we've talked about how weak the East is. I think they've added some solid pieces to kind of help push them up, maybe even some more. But that's kind of my thoughts. They have to finish top 2 for it to be a success. Or if they finish any lower than that, they have to make a deeper run than they've been doing.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly summed up. I would say 2 in the East. If it's not 2 in the East, definitely a run into the conference finals. I'd go that far to say that they should be up there with the Union. Like, this should be the team that we see come probably November, when depending on, I don't even know what the playoffs look like now. But let's assume that it's November. It might be December with how big these playoffs are now. But I think with the Red Bull, Jordan, I think what you said is absolutely correct. They've got one of the best midfields in the MLS. I think they've added a couple attacking pieces that will be nice to add in a couple goals. I think they get up towards, the 50 to 60 goal range again. And I think that, that could push this team and propel this team to become one of the top teams in this league. So, yeah, I am really excited about the Red Bull this year. I think that they've got some great players coming in. I think they've got some great young players in amongst their ranks. I'm really excited about Tolkien. Nealis didn't play as well as he had the year before, but he played pretty well last year too. So, yeah. And then they got a showstopper in Cornell, who's their goalkeeper. So, yeah, I'm in love with this team. I think it's a great team. So I'm excited to see them. I get to see them the first game, so that'll be exciting.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't go good for them, right?
So that's what you're hoping. Well. Let's hope it's the only loss that they have. So
yeah. All right, so let's move on to their crosstown rivals, cross-state rivals, maybe, because Red Bulls play in New Jersey. But we have NYCFC, who really don't have a home in New York either. Reflecting on last year, they finished 3rd in the East. So they actually finished higher than the Red Bulls, who were high on. But the big thing is Castellanos leaves mid-season. They kind of struggled from there. They just traded Herbert, right, to Seattle. Sean Johnson is now a Toronto player. They also lose Maxi Morales. They lose Alexander Kalins, Anton Tinnerholm, Nicholas Acevedo, Santi Rodriguez. This is huge. Who do they add? Well, they add Matt Freese from Philadelphia Union. They also add Matthias Pellegrini, Tony Alfaro. But when we look at how successful they were last season, which was back to an Eastern Conference championship against the Union in a replay from 2021, this isn't the same team. So while last year was a success, I think an undoubted success. You win MLS Cup in 2021. You get back to the Eastern Conference final even after losing your star striker. But now you've lost everyone else. So I think it's hard to kind of reflect on last year for this club because they're not the same players going into this season at all.
Yeah, I made a mistake. I actually left. Well, I don't know if it's a mistake yet because nobody knows or seems to know. Santi Rodriguez, who's a Starlet child, who was their midfielder. I think
he was on loan, right?
Do you not know if he's
coming back or whatever?
They don't know if he's coming back. Like, there's reports, and Bokert retweeted a guy that is pretty reputable as far as South American sources or Mexican. I can't remember which league he'd ended up in. I think it's Mexico maybe, but the source is very reputable in reporting those kind of transfers and said that it was not official, but NYCFC had finalized a deal to kind of bring him back. But there's been no announcement. There's been no connection since then. So it's very confusing. He's crucial to any kind of success that they're going to have this year. That being said, while he is a special talent, Jordan, there's so many pieces that are missing. Keaton Parks is back from his season-ending injury last year. How's that going to go? They're losing arguably one of the best MLS keepers to ever play in Sean Johnson. So, where do they go from here, right? They're going to rely on a lot of guys that have not really proven that they can kind of bang it out in this league, right? You've got guys that are kind of sitting on the cusp, and maybe some young players like Gabriel Pereira, who's a really good talent, who's on the wing, and maybe he's up as a 9. Like, they don't really have a 9 per se. Like, Magno's going to play up there. I think Pereira can play up there at some point, but it just seems like this club is in some major rebuilding. I wouldn't call it retooling. Usually NYCFC, correct me if I'm wrong, is a retool kind of club. This is usually a rebuild.
Yeah.
So I'm not high on NYCFC this year just because of how much.
A lot of people
lost.
aren't. I was seeing a lot of previews with them being 12th and 13th in the East, which is saying something. You'll find out our answers on that midweek, but it's a lot of losses, and it's not a lot of big signings coming in. So it's really hard to say. I think the toughest thing is there's not much to preview with this team because there's just so many. It's such a downer to preview this club. And we don't know if any of this has to do with, I doubt it, but just the Manchester City Football Group situation going on with their investigation.
That's
this
true.
put a huge detriment on the team?
Yeah.
Like, not like the players, but like, is it why they haven't brought in a lot? Is it why they felt like they needed to sell? I don't understand. And this is why it sucks to have both New York teams just be kind of like these feeder clubs, is because neither of them have taken it as seriously. Yes, NYCFC has won an MLS Cup just 2 years ago now, but it's also like, okay, but you also can't just field this team. Like you know, like they're building a stadium in Queens for you now. Maybe that's when they'll put in all of the chips at some point again. Hopefully they'll have a bigger banner too for their MLS Cup. But that's kind of the unfortunate side of this. So for a successful season for this team, the answer should be being a top 4 team again and getting to an Eastern Conference championship again. But with the way that this squad is, a successful season for this team is like, don't finish last in the East. And that's not good enough for a team of this caliber, a team that's usually constantly competitive. So if there's 9 playoff teams, I'm going to say a successful season is finish 9th, get into the playoffs. You lost so much. You can still turn it around maybe. Maybe they'll make a big summer splash. I don't know. That's why it's so hard to kind of do predictions for MLS too, because you don't know who's going to add in like the summer window. We know LA Galaxy can't. But, when you have these other clubs that might be able to entice players to come over. I mean, Gareth Bale came over in summer, and that was a huge signing that we could not predict going into the season. So that's why I think a lot of times you'll see people get this stuff really, really wrong, because it's really hard to predict who's going to spend in the summer. So I'd say as it stands now with this team, finish 9th, get in the playoffs if there's 9 playoff teams. And that's not what I should be saying. That is a disgrace for New York.
Yeah, like I had all this stuff not happen, had all those turnover not happen, and then they don't go and replace this turnover. Like you said, it would be, 4th and above, like they always are, because that's who City Football Group should be. But man, the fact that we're even talking about NYCFC and some of these teams, I think, Jordan, that we're going to get into that are just so low, and it's just like, what's going on? Like what's happening? And I will say with some of the teams like Atlanta, like there's stuff to look forward to, right? Like I think that's something that we can say, like, oh yeah, Atlanta's looking up. But like DC United,
Atlanta too, though.
Chicago,
with Atlanta, we're looking at Garth Lagerwey, like, okay, building something, right? With this, it's like we don't know what they're building even.
Yeah, they're not even building a stadium, so let alone a team.
They are. I mean, they are. Eventually,
they say they are. We'll believe it when it's up. But no, I think, Jordan, like you said, I think pushing for the 9th playoff spot is yikes. But that's where we are, I think, with NYCFC. I think they got 2 special players if Santi does come back. But that being said, man, a lot of unprovens and lots of question marks in New York City this year, and it's not with the Red Bull.
All right, let's move on to the last team. Another team that we're probably not too high on is a team that may not finish high on the table. It's the New England Revolution. Head coach is Bruce Arena. Last year, they finished 10th in the East. They scored 47, but gave up 50. Carlos Gil was healthy and only had 7 goals and 9 assists, which is not the level I think we should usually be seeing him at. Gustavo Bo had 8 goals. He led the team. Again, this is when we're talking about teams, leaders scoring goals, and they only have 8, that's an issue when you're looking at, okay, like Nashville's leading was 23, right now. But then everyone after that was 5. But you know, even then, 8 is only 3 above 5. Who was the second most on Nashville? Like, that's worrying when you're looking at the Revolution. And really, they've kind of been in a little bit of a I wouldn't say free fall, but a little bit of a decline since they had that supporter shield, right? But, you know, Bruce Arena's back. How big of that is that? How big of a deal is that? We don't really know at this point on how long he's going to continue staying. He kind of seemed down on it last year at times when people would ask him. So I guess kind of surprising he came back. They had a 2-month spiral at the end of the season that really just sank them from even getting a chance of a playoff spot. They lost Sebastian Lletget now, AJ De La Garza, John Bell, Wilfred Kaptoum. They bring in Dave Romney, Latif Blessing, Christian McCoon, Bobby Wood, Nacho Heel, who had 4 matches with them last year, but now is official with them. I like a lot of these signings, obviously. I like the Latif Blessing signing. I like the Bobby Wood, even though he was injured for a good chunk of last year. You know, bringing in Romney and McCoon, I think those are great signings, but it's how much can this kind of catapult them further than 10th in the table? Your thoughts, Logan, on just last year and then some of these departures and arrivals?
I mean, you lose Matt Turner, right? Adam Buxa, Tejon Buchanan, combined for $54 million into the pockets of the Revs ownership. Robert Kraft, who is one of the richest men, if not one richest men in this league. Jordan, probably one of the richest owners besides Arthur Blank, I want to say. And they don't really spend it. Like, they are good with flipping the profit, but it never seems to go the other direction for the Revs. And it really hasn't. Like, honestly, Dave Romney is the one that excites me the most. I don't think Latif's good, but I don't think he's like a game changer. I don't think he's somebody that's really going to change anything. Bobby Wood was hurt all last season, so I don't think that changes much either. That's like bringing TL Bunbury back. And so that's kind of just like a non-factor to me. Nacho Heel, like, he's just Carlos's brother. So sorry, but it's true. Jordan, they've wasted Carlos Heel, if that makes sense. It's weird to say that, but they've wasted one of the best players to play in MLS over the last couple of years. And by what I mean by that is their supporter shield and very short MLS Cup run that they had when they did win supporter shield back in 2021. That was very short lived. And then, like you said, from then on out, it's been just like, well, we've got these really good players that we need to sell. And then what, right? DeJuan Jones, he's not going to be around any much. I think in the summer, there's a good chance we're seeing another Revolution exodus, because I think that some of these players, you look at DeJuan Jones. DeJuan Jones had one of the best camps in February that we've seen with, you know, some of these younger players. And so I think DeJuan Jones is easily going to be sold. There's linkage to other players or places. I think Brandon Bai has a good chance to also go bye-bye. And then you look at Petrovic, who was linked to Manchester United, still is linked to Manchester United. There's no chance he's here in the summer, I don't think. So they're going to lose.
You think that quick? You think that quick?
Yep, I really do.
Wow. Yep. I think they'll be able to hold on to him for the season. I think next summer he's gone. But
okay. I don't know. I look at the DeJuan Jones. I really do feel like in the summer he's going to be looking to move, and so it just feels like it's been this 2-year exodus of players, but nobody brought in, right? Nobody brought in to really kind of cushion that blow. It just doesn't.
I mean, we just named them all, but
yeah, but like not much, right? Like I said, Latif Blessing, he's kind of a non-factor for me. He's okay, like he's decent. He's a pretty good midfielder.
I think that's a great signing.
I do. I look at this team. Their defense is going to be good because of their goalkeeper too, but their attack is going to lack. And I just don't see where this team's gotten any better. They do have Carlos Heel. People are going, well, Carlos Heel's an MVP. Yeah, I wouldn't say he's there anymore, but it just, I don't know. There's a lot riding on Carlos Heel.
He won MVP in the season. I didn't think I thought Mukhtar should have got it.
That's true. We both did. So I am not high on the Revs, and I know people are going to come after me for that one when we repost this one because they're like, well, clearly they have us ranked. I'm like, but you're the selling club. You've become this selling club like Dallas, where you just get rid of players now. Like it just becomes like that. So
I think this will be the make or break year for Bruce Arena. This has got to be it. If they finish 10th or lower, or even, I would say specifically if they miss the playoffs like they did last year, I think Bruce is gone. They'll be nice about it. They'll probably say they parted ways and that he is retiring, or maybe he's, moving on or whatever. But
he's going to go to Tampa and coach the Rowdies.
Yeah. But I do think this league might have passed Bruce Arena by. He's been a fixture of it since its inception. He's won so many MLS Cups. I think it might be time for him to hang it up. I do believe the Revs are cursed at this point because they bring in one of the best managers in the history and they still can't get an MLS Cup. So that sucks for them. But I think this is a make or break year for it. So if I'm going to say what is a successful season for this Revolution team, I would say you can't miss the playoffs again. I say you make the playoffs, and I would like you to make it not be the last team into the playoffs is probably where I would put that for this squad.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they're in the same – they and New York City are in the same boat. Like NYCFC and I think the Revs are in the same boat. Like they've got some – decent pieces on the team, like a Carlos Heel. I think, I just don't, I'm just sitting here thinking about the club, and I just don't think that they're that great. I just, like you said, I think Bruce's time is up, and I think that's it.
All right, another Revolution recap, guys. Listen to this. So direct all your hate towards Logan. I'm a little higher on you than he is.
I can honestly tell you, I'm looking at Jordan's season previews, and we're about the same. So no, he's not. Don't let him say that. Don't let him say that.
In this episode, I'm a little higher on them than he is. All right.
I hate this team. No, I'm kidding. I
just had to check to see my predictions because I was like, wait, did I actually put them where I'm saying right now? And no, I didn't. So that, stay tuned for midweek when we give out our things, our
laminators. I mean,
laminate these. All fans of all teams, you're gonna want to laminate whatever we say and throw it back at us. Logan, I saw you were already feeling the heat today because you put out a tweet saying, like, I don't know why people get so worked up about this. Like, you were preempting.
Yeah, I am preempting.
You were preempting this.
Okay, here's my thing. Okay, if you're listening to this and you're going to yell at us like the Revs people, I know they are, because we've got quite a big following of Revs fans. We have a lot of Revs fans. We have a lot of Cincy fans. We have, I'm trying to think of any other club that Austin. We have a lot of Austin. Austin we're high on. The other one's been Cincy. I think you'll be happy with us. Revs fans, if you have any complaints, just write down your predictions of what you think this year is going to be. And then when you decide to yell at us next year, when we do this again, go, oh yeah, remember my predictions last year when they weren't great? This league is impossible to predict. I think you can pick out the cream of the crop. That's easy. That's always easy. But this league is absolutely bonkers. And this Eastern Conference, when we do the Eastern Conference, Jordan, it'll be a whole lot of like, I have no idea, or just guessing at this point, because I don't know half of these teams anymore. So.
Yeah, that'll be the fun part, right? Is this league is very hard to predict because, like I mentioned earlier, you can bring in people in the summer, which we don't really get with like baseball and stuff. Like you get trade windows, but you can't just like go over and be like, oh yeah, Gareth Bale, we'll bring him over. Like you can't do that in baseball. You can't do that in football or basketball. So it's a little harder to make these predictions when the whole world is your oyster to go out and grab players from any league that you can and bring them in, unless you're the Galaxy. And that is, something that they're going to have to struggle with in the summer. And then also another part that comes out on it is just the parity of it and how soccer, I think, is a much closer sport than most games because it is so hard to score, unless if you're the Union facing DC United last year. But But that's kind of the stuff that's so unpredictable of figuring out, okay, where am I putting them? Bringing in players, you don't know how they're going to fit. You don't know how they're going to translate to this league. So it's such a tough thing to do compared to like other leagues, other sports in this country. I mean, Logan and I did a brief baseball podcast last year, and I think our predictions were pretty close. We were pretty darn close with a lot of those because it's so much easier to predict stuff like that than this league. But yeah, so don't hate us. Anything else before we get out of here?
If you're a team out there and you're listening to this and you're the fan base, it could be worse. You could be a Chicago Fire fan.
Logan just wanted to throw some unnecessary shade at Chicago.
If you go back to listen to our last 5 episodes, we all have thrown punches at the Chicago Fire. So
yeah, we brought the heat. But yeah, so we are going to be doing our preseason prediction show. Next episode, we're going to pick Coach of the Year, MVP, Supporter Shield winner, Open Cup winner, MLS Cup winner, and then the full table of both the East and the West. We're going to lay it all on the line here. I know some people only choose their winner of the Cup and the winner of the Supporter Shield. We're doing the full table, and we're going to give it our best shot. We're going to hopefully nail it. We did not nail it last season. We're one of the ones that Austin probably laminated last year. And we're probably going to have Adrian Heath after us for where we put Minnesota. So keep an eye out for that in the midweek. But thank you all for watching. If you want to give us a follow or want to reach out to us, give us your predictions or yell at us about any of these, it's at Stateside Show on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Email us statesideshow@gmail.com. And we will catch you Wednesday.